Welcome to Faithful Conversations about Abortion, a project of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. I'm Connie Ryan, Executive Director and moderator of the conversation. We are very glad to have you join us to listen to some of Iowa's faith and community leaders. We hope you will allow it to inform and to challenge your own conversation in your community. Faithful Conversations about Abortion is a video series and a tool to help faith communities hold community conversations regarding access to reproductive health care, including safe and legal abortion. It is a series of conversations with clergy and community leaders from across Iowa on different aspects of the issue. Our goal is simple: to help communities of faith hold what may on the surface be difficult conversations, but to enable all of us to hold that conversation in a thoughtful manner rather than one that is political or divisive. Today's conversation is about the moral impact of and who is impacted the most when access to abortion is limited. Our panel today includes Gabriela Fuentes, who is an advocacy manager with Planned Parenthood of North Central States, and the Reverend Brigit Stevens, who is a minister in the United Church of Christ. Welcome, Gabby and Brigit. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gabby, I'm going to start with you with a question. Tell us about the impact on diverse communities when abortion rights on reproductive health care are restricted, and why is it imperative to focus on marginalized communities when ensuring access to reproductive health care, including safe and legal abortion?
It is extremely important to focus on marginalized communities when ensuring access to reproductive care, including safe and legal abortion, because the lack of access to safe abortions will also cause health and financial consequences, aggravating factors like poverty and systemic racism. These consequences are far beyond a severe inability to terminate a pregnancy. In some circumstances, carrying a pregnancy to term can endanger the pregnant person's life, disrupt educational plans, and change someone's career trajectory, adding more disadvantages for already marginalized groups. Abortion bans will also increase maternal mortality. We all already know that Iowa has the fewest OBGYN specialists per capita nationwide. 66 of the 99 counties in Iowa lack sufficient OBGYN care. So can you imagine how this affects rural Iowans and people of color? For example, we all already know this, but Black mothers in the US are 3 times more likely to die than white mothers. And the disparity is so much worse here in Iowa because Black mothers in this state are 6 times more likely to die than white mothers.
Thank you, Gabby. And Brigit, Reverend Stevens, through the lens of your faith, how do you view abortion as a moral issue and why?
So I'm really disheartened how we have taken the really complex and diverse and layered and really important conversations around healthcare and caring for folks and simplified it into a yes or no access or no access and all or nothing. And frankly, that the impact of that, which Gabby has already started to point out, is just it impacts all of our communities differently and disparately, and it's irresponsible and frankly, in my opinion, immoral and unfaithful to my call of, being in community and caring for the least of those in my community well, to disregard their spoken needs. And so it inserts laws and policymakers and legislators into conversations that ought to be between the pregnant people and their families and their spiritual leaders and their healthcare providers. And that each circumstance just requires care and honoring of each beautiful individual. And all of our major faith traditions and humanist traditions focus on caring well for one another. And we know that when we care best for folks who are at the edges of our community, that actually benefits all of us. When we have access for those who it's hardest to get access, then everybody's got better access, right? So it's actually even, I love to make the argument, it's also self-serving, frankly. It's loving my neighbor as myself, that we all benefit in this. And so I think in honoring and respecting each human and their really beautiful and diverse needs, taking away those choices and those tools, including safe and legal abortions, is disrespectful to humanity. And so from that faith and moral perspective, I lean in very hard at honoring each of those circumstances to be handled with the care and the attention that they deserve, and all of the tools that they deserve.
Thank you. Gabby's already talked a little bit about when abortions are restricted in states and the disproportionate impact on communities of color, those in poverty, et cetera. Can you, either of you, be a little bit more specific on how that plays out in the real world? How does that impact somebody who is pregnant and may be considering an abortion and they don't have access to that? What does that look like?
How it affects in the rural world, you say, Connie?
Or communities of color, those who are marginalized. How does that look?
Like who's impacted the most?
Yeah, and how that looks in somebody's real life.
Yeah, so the thing with this is that Iowans are already being impacted by barriers to access to abortion. In Iowa, we have the 24-hour waiting period. We have the parent of a minor must be notified before an abortion is provided. A patient must undergo an ultrasound before obtaining an abortion, and an abortion may be performed at 20 or more weeks post-fertilization, and that's why we are saying that abortion is still legal in this state. But besides that, all these barriers, when abortion is banned or restricted, of course it's going to affect everybody, but marginalized people the most, because they cannot afford to travel to another state for care. They imagine a single mother. Imagine a person living under a domestic violence household. Imagine a student who cannot even try to, miss class, miss work, like all this money. And because we have all these barriers, imagine how many times you need to plan with your kids, with your family, with your work to get 2 or 3 appointments just to get your abortion. Of course, it's going to affect everybody.
Yeah.
And if you're in that domestic violence situation and you're trying to, you've perhaps been raped by your spouse and trying to get access and having to go twice and not let him know. I mean, there's real impact, real repercussions when people cannot choose to access the health care that they actually need. I think, Brigit,
Right.
you were going to say something else?
Yeah, so you know me, Connie, I always kind of like to come at it from the opposite and a little bit snarky direction as well, is to say that we already know how this works, right? History, we've lived this history and within generations who are alive today, right? So we know that folks who have money and power and white skin and live in safe neighborhoods have access to anything and everything they want when they need to. And these bans and restrictions get written from the perspective of folks who are not feeling that impact, right? And not understanding what it's like to get up before dawn, to go work 3 jobs, to get home well after sunset, to maybe tuck your kids in at night, and then wonder about, well, do I pay the light bill or the grocery bill or medications this week? Oh, on top of it, I have this horrible circumstance that my entire life is about to be upended with this unplanned pregnancy from whichever direction it came from, right? And so I think what's really most frustrating too is this lack of empathy for the real life, everyday struggle of folks who need extra help and access and community. And so the moral imperative is to lean in and say, how do we make things easier in all the directions? And we can't look at abortion as one single item somehow miraculously outside of the context of everybody's everyday lives. And this is about real healthcare, real capacity to flourish and to live and to sustain community and well-being. And so I think from that perspective, it's not really all that hard to sit down and just imagine for a moment, right? Even if you don't have someone in your life that has lived with this, with the struggle of making choices like this.
So then, and this is for either of you, whoever wants to jump in first, what does good reproductive health care look like, particularly for marginalized communities? What does it include? The positive side of it. If we had a magic wand, what does good care look like?
I want you to lead us, Gabby.
Right. Good care. When I think about good care, I think about something as simple as reproductive care for white people. What everybody needs, it's access to basic healthcare needs. No stigma, no discrimination. Because we already know that marginalized people always had difficulty accessing equitable healthcare due to disparities in medicine, such as sexism, racism, homophobia, and transphobia. So thinking about good reproductive care, we are thinking the same as everybody should deserve.
Yeah. So I think if I had my magic wand, Connie, I think about access, right? So that means geographic access, that we have OBGYNs everywhere who are available all the time. We're not talking about making an appointment and not able to get in for 4, 6, 8 weeks, which of course we know is a struggle here in Iowa, even in the best of circumstances. We talk about access, including folks who understand culture and language and family structure and all the nuances that are important that each different cultural and circumstance necessitates. I think about price and about availability and about childcare and about stigma. Thank you so much for lifting that up, about this capacity to just really care for our bodies really well and honoring them and honoring the fact that we are sexual human beings in need of health and that that's a good piece of who we are, and therefore we shouldn't be afraid to get help when we need it. And all of those pieces combined would be what good healthcare looks like. And frankly, that would be true for all of us. So again, coming back to this, when we serve people on the edges of our community really well, it benefits everybody in between.
Yeah. Gabby, you are the advocacy manager at Planned Parenthood, and so you work on public policy. That's part of your job, right? And so how could public policy have a positive impact on ensuring access to safe and legal abortion for communities of color and other marginalized communities?
I would say by having more educated people at the legislature. The educational level of most anti-abortion senators and legislators are really low, and they are led by the culture of fear. And this means that they are scared of everything that it's not white or heterosexual. So these biases and this stigma could end if there are more prepared and educated people representing Iowans and less uneducated politicians who are not prepared to work with real scientific-based information because they have their own personal beliefs and they don't want to see the other side.
Mm-hmm. And so they have been creating public policy that have obviously limited access, whether it's the 24-hour, the 6-week ban, all of those pieces. Is there something that they could do in public policy that would actually help communities of color and other marginalized communities? Are there things that they could do in law? Do you have suggestions in law of that would be a positive impact for folks?
It will be
Besides
just
taking away those other things, the 6-week ban, and
yes.
actually things that can help people.
Mm-hmm.
Things that they can help people. I was thinking that's why we need educated people creating these laws, and of course, no stigma. I'm just gonna insist with that. If you are creating a law with no stigma, with scientific-based information, that's gonna benefit everyone because they are in a position of power when their own personal beliefs are not just for them; it's for everybody. So when you're creating law, you really need to get rid of your stigma. You need to be an educated person. You need to know about the issue. We've been saying that they are no doctors, so they shouldn't be talking as if they were doctors. That's what I will say, that when they are creating laws.
It seems to me that not just around abortion, but in the idea of healthcare in general, right? So abortion is the particular moment that in time that or tool that we're looking at in this moment in time. But in general, it makes really good sense to me that politicians get out of the healthcare business. And so if our laws or our constitutions protected the right for human beings to seek appropriate healthcare according to data and science and their healthcare providers, that seems really like a good idea to me, to put the decision making back in the hands of the folks seeking the care. And that there would be then a shift in culture, potentially, hopefully, around really honoring the person who needs care, the family structure, the spiritual leader they look to, right? I don't call my senator when I am uncertain about my swollen lymph nodes or right, sore throat. Like, that's not the role of politics. But they could be protecting my right to seek care. And that's what I would want, especially our faith communities, to really wrestle with. I have to own that that it is folks interpreting Christianity, which, that is my faith as well, but interpreting a very narrow vision of Christianity that is infecting a lot of these laws. And I think that that's inappropriate use of our faith. It isn't, it's also not representative of faith in general, of Christian faith for sure, but of faith of all faiths. And so I really feel like our politicians could be protecting our rights. And then when we exercise those rights, we lean in on our communities and our spiritual leaders and our families to do that well.
Yeah, and I would just build off of what Gabby said of educated and factually based policy. And you mentioned earlier also, Gabby, that maternal health care is an issue in our state because of the lack of OBGYNs across the state, and particularly in rural Iowa and the deserts that we have in that. And if only those more educated politicians and policymakers would pay attention to those pieces of the puzzle, incentives for OBGYNs to care for people in different marginalized communities in rural Iowa, incentives to be an OBGYN and not make the laws so draconian that impact our University of Iowa School of Medicine, for example, and to keep OBGYNs in Iowa. The maternal health care units at hospitals that have closed across the state. And if politicians were paying attention to those facts that you were referencing, Gabby, and building public policy based on facts that actually helped people, particularly in marginalized communities, and marrying that with what Brigit was saying of getting politicians out of our doctor's offices, so to speak, I think that would be of great help to Iowans, and particularly Iowans who are part of marginalized communities. Any last words that either of you want to add? It's always a little bit of a difficulty to say that to a preacher, but any last words that you would want to make sure folks think about in terms of the impact of limiting access to abortion and reproductive health care and the impact on marginalized communities?
I will say stop the culture of fear, but educating yourself. I will encourage everybody to keep educating yourself, because as you mentioned, Connie, what we are facing right now, all the bills that are being introduced they don't have scientific-based information, right? Like it's coming from a personal belief, and it's not something that the community needs. And it's because most of the time they are saying it's something that scares people, right? Oh, because this person is from the LGBTQ community, they are Latinos. For example, we have seen our governor went to the border again and said horrible things against the Latinx community. So again, it's coming from the personal beliefs and not real facts. We need real facts. And the only way that we can do that, it's educating yourself, share the good work with your community. And if we do that, a lot of us, if we do that, we are going to get to the legislature and we are going to get bills that are actually real facts.
Thank you, Gabby. Brigit?
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of that those real facts point to the impact of these laws. And that's where I want to live out my faith, is really paying attention to what decisions, what the actual impact is, not my intent, but how it actually lands. And so paying attention to who's being harmed, who's really struggling, how, and believing those numbers. Even, to be honest, I really encourage faithful folks to wrestle with the concept of maybe not liking abortion, right? Like personally, right? Wrestling with that, understanding that's my personal understanding and feeling, and understanding the impact of not having access for others, right? Or not having choices for others. And really owning that responsibility to care for others.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you. Reverend Brigit Stevens, Gabriela Fuentes, thank you so much for being with us and sharing of your time and your expertise. I really appreciate both of you. Thank you to each of you who are watching, your willingness to listen and engage in the conversation. It is important. For more information about Faithful Conversations about Abortion or Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, you can go to interfaithallianceiowa.org. Thank you so much, and
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you, Connie. Take care.